Alright then guys, welcome to the video, welcome back to the channel, and today we're going to talk about whether it's actually worth mapping one of these Honda Civic Type R EP3s. And first up, I'm going to go through some things that if you've got previous reservations on doing this, that I thought I would clear up beforehand. First up, is it going to overstress the engine on these long term? Obviously, tuning this car is going to put the car through more stress over all of the parts, as they technically were designed for a 200 horsepower car. That being said though, Honda has massively over-engineered this engine, and it's probably very well known to you by now that these K20s can actually handle up to 400 brake horsepower without opening them up or anything. So tuning them for an NA setup isn't actually going to stress these out too much. And with the power that these things do make at these NA numbers, it isn't too much more for the parts around the engine to also put up with as well. And I guess this car can be proof to that. So far, over the 3 years or so that this car has been mapped, I haven't had a single mechanical issue that's actually caused this thing to have any problems. Now, if you were having issues, this is where today's video sponsor, Olly, can help you out. Olly's app and scanner give you manufacturer level diagnostics, coding customization, as well as access to hidden information in your car. So let's plug Olly into my brother-in-law's BMW 1 Series. This is super simple. You just download the app on your phone, plug the Olly device into the car. All right, let's open the app and get scanning basically. So we've got BMW 1 Series. So let's connect to the scanner. Let's go. The Olly app is free to download and use, but the paid version unlocks a load more features. Okay, we are ready to start. Check for issues, let's do it. Diagnostics complete. Health status, very bad. So what we can do is clear the issues and then I guess see what comes back. Nice, so only one has stayed. The brake vacuum pressure sensor. An optional extra feature, which you can see here, is the smart mechanic feature. Now this is cool because it means you can actually learn exactly what the problem is to either fix it yourself or gain the knowledge to actually know what the problem is so you don't get ripped off and overcharged for any work done at the dealership, for example. So you can see it gives a load of options here and you can click on these and look at all this information that it's giving you, all to do with what could be related to this issue. But we might as well have a look at what can be coded into this as well. This coding feature works on BMW, Mini, Audi, Volkswagen, Seat and Skoda. Olly will actually do a backup to save your ECU in the form that it was in case you want to revert anything back to how it was before. Number of compatible ECUs, 9. Okay, let's see what we can do. Whoa, there's loads of features we can choose from. Combi, dashboard, instrument cluster, let's have a look. Digital speedometer, all right, we'll turn that on. Digital speedometer, corrected speed. Code. Coding was successful. And now you can see that, look, it shows the miles per hour, and that wasn't on there before. So if you're interested in one of these, there is a link in the description to go pick one up, or use this discount code on screen to be able to save yourself 15% on your very own Olly. So shout out to Olly for sponsoring this video. Let's get back to it. Is it annoying running 99 RON fuel constantly in this thing? It's actually not been too bad. I was always running higher octane fuel in this anyway before it was mapped, so it wasn't actually that much of a change. And because I run this on Tesco Momentum, it does mean that pretty much anywhere in the country I can get a hold of that fuel. I have recently just moved to somewhere that has a Tesco fuel station as well, and that may have been one of the reasons why I've moved here. All that it does really mean is you do have to slightly plan where you're going to get your fuel from, because not all of the fuel places do use the 99 RON. You can get away with using 95 if you're in an absolute emergency situation, if you haven't got drop-in cams. But Romain from RaceCal said once I actually mapped this with the cams in there, he said, do not run this on 95 ever. If you don't go for drop-in cams, you can get away with it, but I would definitely not recommend doing any sort of hard driving with that 95 fuel in the car, because you could cause some pretty major problems. Can you run the standard clutch on these things? Yes, you can. At NA power, the OEM clutch can handle that just fine. I've replaced the clutch in this with an OEM clutch and I've had zero problems. Does the MPG get worse when you map this thing? Obviously, it depends on how you drive it, and obviously once it's mapped, you're gonna want to drive it more aggressively, which will use more fuel. But generally, actually, I found that the fuel economy is about the same, if not slightly better, and I'm gonna touch on this more later. Will the insurance prices go up? Well, unfortunately, yes, in my case anyway. Because this car is now running more than 25% more power than it came as standard, it does mean that I have to pay more insurance because it's classed as a highly modified vehicle. I believe if you don't go for the cams, the power you'll gain actually drops you below 25%, so you won't pay quite as much, but there is going to be an increase because there is more power, so insurance companies see that as a higher risk. I also have all of my mods declared through a modified car insurance, and actually I found that all the mods I add to the car do not actually increase the price unless it increases power. And probably the most upsetting one, at least in my opinion, is that the Vtec crossover does change. The Honda map is designed to make you feel and hear that crossover more, but it isn't the best designed for the most responsive and cleanest power delivery. So my car went from sounding like this to sounding like this. Now don't get me wrong, it does still sound good, but I do definitely miss that really pronounced crossover onto the Vtec cam. I hope you enjoyed the video. Just a quick reminder to hit that subscribe button if you are enjoying the content. I know that most of you watching this aren't subscribed, so really help me out. It's completely free as well. Anyway, back to the video. And with the parts that you can get for this car to increase its power, there are different levels at which these parts can make a bigger difference based on which ones you choose. As an example, with my first map, I had the spoon exhaust system, and the smaller diameter of that catback was costing me 20-ish horsepower because I only made 220 horsepower on the dyno, even though I had all the other ingredients to make that bigger number. That being said, there are different options for intake, for the inlet manifold, and for all the parts of the exhaust that can affect the power that you're going to get from the car. So it really depends on what you're after to whether you're happy with that. Obviously the parts that flow the best do usually cost more as well, so it just depends on your budget and what you're willing to spend to be able to get that extra horsepower. And obviously that was something I had to learn the hard way because I had to buy a completely different exhaust system to be able to gain that extra power. So by changing from the spoon exhaust system to this solid fab 3-inch exhaust system, I managed to gain about 20 horsepower if you don't include the cams. And 20 horsepower for changing one part is pretty extreme, so just make sure you do the research on the parts that you're buying for your car to see whether they do make the power that you're after. That also being said, it does depend because I would argue potentially that the spoon exhaust system did sound a bit better than this solid fab. You win some, you lose some. It kind of depends on what you're after from your build. I guess what I'm trying to say is I learned the hard way in two ways in the fact that I had to get a different exhaust system, which cost me twice, and I also had to get another remap, which cost me again. So try and get it right on the first time, and that way you won't have to spend money twice like I did. If you are looking to buy some parts to make this thing go faster, and for example you want to replicate the setup that I have, I did some maths on this thing and it's pretty wild how expensive all this stuff is brand new nowadays, because I definitely didn't pay this much. But to replicate this setup, which is the Tegua carbon airbox, silicone hose, Skunk 2 Ultra Street inlet manifold, Skunk 2 drop-in cams with the RDX injectors, plus the plugs you need for that, as well as the solid fab big bore manifold and solid fab super silent exhaust, all of those parts together come to just over £4,000 brand new, which is pretty nuts. And that doesn't include any labor to fit any of it. It also doesn't include the ECU, which for the ECU and map, you're probably looking at about another £1,000 if you go for a Doctronic or a K100 secondhand or something like that. Also bear in mind those parts prices I just said were all brand new. For example, my Tegua airbox was secondhand and my entire solid fab exhaust system was also secondhand, so I've saved money there. But that still doesn't get around the fact that it is still quite expensive to get what I guess turbo people would class as not that much power out of these things. If you're not interested in doing the drop-in cams like I have in here, that will cut the price down to £2,800. And so what sort of power are you going to be making once you do all of these modifications? So with just the standard cams, these K20s make around about 240-ish horsepower. Some make a little bit more, and adding drop-in cams like the Skunk 2 drop-in cams I've got in this adds pretty much another 10 horsepower on top of that. So this car is running 254 brake horsepower. Now, although those peak numbers are great to talk about with your friends, where you're really going to notice the difference with a map for these things, and this is the main reason why I recommend doing it, is for the mid-range gain. The car is absolutely transformed when you do this. 100% a better car, because you gain over 50 horsepower in the mid-range, and it transforms how this thing drives, how it drives day to day, as well as obviously when you put your foot down. The Vtec crossover also gets dropped down to 4,500 RPM if you don't have the cams, and around 5,000 if you do have the cams, and that is also a hell of a lot more fun than having it up higher in the rev range. Now I'm guessing if you're thinking about mapping your car, it probably means you already have a couple of mods on the car already, whether that be an exhaust or an intake. The biggest change for me when Remain mapped this car is how smooth this thing is to drive now. It is effortless at any RPM. That is one, down to the amount of time he spent on the day-to-day drivability, but that is also because if you think this car in standard form, the map for the standard car with the standard parts is designed for those parts. If you change some of those things out, you start getting more air into the engine and more air out, but you don't change the ECU, you'll start getting lumpiness and sluggishness because that ECU map isn't designed to adjust for those things. By getting the ECU remapped, you smooth out all of that because it is designed specifically for your engine and for your mods, and that makes such a huge difference to day-to-day drivability with this thing. That coupled with the extra power just means this thing is a completely different thing to drive. I guess the best way to explain it is it just feels more effortless to actually drive this thing around. And leading on from that point, you know how this car absolutely loves and encourages you to push it harder and push it right up the rev range? Well, when you get it mapped, it wants you to do that even more. And obviously that's one of the main reasons why we even bought this car in the first place. So the fact you get another level of that is just so much fun. So it has been 2 years since this car got mapped with the cams, and I thought I'd give you a 2-year ownership sort of review on how it's been. Fundamentally, it's been completely fine. You absolutely can daily a car with dropping cams and it works as you'd expect it should. Haven't had a single issue mechanically since it's been done. The only thing that's gone wrong is that my throttle position sensors failed and I had to get that replaced. I'd say probably the major downside to them is that the engine just sounds like a diesel now. It's definitely got this weird transit van kind of ticking. And that does overpower some of the other sounds that the car makes, which is a slight shame, but you do get used to it over time, so it doesn't really matter too much. The really crazy thing for me has been actually the MPG of this thing. The best I've got out of this on just a single motorway run is 39.4 MPG, which, considering the type of car that this is, I think is absolutely crazy. That is a huge win and something I definitely wasn't expecting when I got it done. Now the big one, do I think that the cams are worth it? If you're wanting the exact setup that I have in my car right now, the full list of parts that you will actually need to do this are the drop-in cams, the RDX injectors, the clips for those RDX injectors, as well as a rocker cover gasket, because obviously you've got to get those cams in the engine. All of that comes in at just over £1,200. That doesn't include the labour to fit the cams in there either. So in total, you're probably looking at £1,600 to £1,800 for what is basically 10 horsepower gain. I think personally, I had to do it because I just had to know what it was like with them, otherwise I'd always be wondering. And having to change the exhaust to get more power anyway gave me the excuse to be able to actually commit to doing it. But to be honest, for the 10 horsepower, it's quite a hard sell unless you're really chasing those numbers. But again, this is still like a daily car. So you could go for a more aggressive cam, which actually wouldn't cost you too much more money than what I've already spent. I'm personally happy that I've done it this time. With my red EP3, I'm not worried about putting cams in that. So if you do want to save that £1,300 in parts and put that towards something else, then I totally understand. But at the same time, getting that extra 10 horsepower is pretty nice. It's just up to you on whether you think that's worth it or not. Another thing to bear in mind as well is once the cams are in the engine, you cannot drive the car until it is going on the dyno, because you risk bore wash from the injectors overfueling into the engine, as well as also the standard ECU obviously doesn't know that it's got different cams in it, so you can risk damaging the engine that way too. So the other thing you have to do is plan in when you're going to install them to when the car's getting mapped. I guess trailer the car to the dyno, unless where you're getting it dynoed is where you're also having the work done. It gets a bit complicated, so that's another thing to bear in mind as well. If you've got any other questions, leave them in the comment section down below, and also if you've got a mapped EP3 already, leave a comment down below on how you find your car and how much better it is than the standard car. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel if you enjoyed this one, like this one, and I'll catch you guys in the next one.